At some point you made a decision. You chose a career, a relationship, a way of living, a set of goals you have been working toward ever since. But here is the question nobody ever asks you. Were those actually your choices? Or were they the carefully inherited fears, unfulfilled dreams, and unexamined expectations of every person who had authority over you before you were old enough to know the difference? Because here is what the science now confirms. By the time you were capable of consciously choosing anything, your personality, your ambitions, your deepest beliefs about what you deserve and what is possible for you had already been written. Not by you, by the people and systems around you, in a language so deep it feels like your own voice. Most people will live their entire lives inside someone else's story and never once suspect it. Today we go into how it happened, how to recognize it, and how you find your way back to the life that was actually yours to begin with. Let's go deeper. When people talk about inheritance, they think of money, property, physical things passed from one generation to the next. But there is another kind of inheritance, one that is never discussed, never acknowledged, and never consented to, the inheritance of unlived lives. Your parents had dreams they never pursued, fears they never resolved, wounds that never healed. And because the human psyche does not simply contain these things, because unresolved material seeks expression and completion, it finds another vehicle, you, the child who arrives open, absorbing, and completely unable to distinguish between what belongs to them and what belongs to the people around them, becomes the carrier of everything the previous generation could not complete. The father who never pursued his passion unconsciously steers his child toward security above everything else. The mother whose confidence was destroyed transmits the belief that ambition is dangerous. The family system that survived on self-suppression produces children who experience their own desires as threats. None of this is malicious. Almost none of it is conscious. But the effect is the same. You grow up shaped by the unfinished business of people who came before you, carrying ambitions that are not yours, fears that are not yours, definitions of success and failure that were never designed with you in mind. And because it all arrived before you had language for it, before you had any framework to evaluate it, it feels indistinguishable from who you actually are. Let's go deeper. The family was only the first layer, because the system that received you when you left the family home was equally invested in telling you who to be. The education system handed you a script before you were old enough to audition for a different role. It measured your worth by a narrow set of metrics, designed not to develop human potential, but to sort human beings into the categories the economy required. And then it rewarded the children who fit those categories and quietly communicated to everyone else that they were the problem. By the time most people reach adulthood, they have received thousands of hours of messaging about what a successful life looks like, what a respectable career is, what kind of relationships are normal, what level of ambition is appropriate, what desires are acceptable, and which ones should be kept quietly to yourself. And here is the critical point. None of this messaging was designed with you specifically in mind. It was designed for a statistical average, for a society that needed workers, consumers, and compliant citizens in specific proportions. Your individuality, the specific, unrepeatable combination of capacities, desires, and ways of being that constitute who you actually are. was never the system's concern. Fitting you into a predetermined shape was. So by the time you are making your first major life decisions, career, relationships, where to live, what to pursue, you are not choosing from a blank slate of genuine possibility. You are choosing from a menu that was designed by forces that had never met you and had no interest in what would actually make you come alive. This is not conspiracy in the dramatic sense. It is simply what happens when a system optimizes for its own continuation rather than for the flourishing of the individuals inside it. Let's go deeper. So how do you recognize it? Because the most insidious aspect of this inheritance is that it does not feel inherited. It feels like you. It feels like your personality, your preferences, your values. The voice that tells you what you should want sounds exactly like your own voice. But there are signals, precise, consistent signals that point toward a life that has been shaped more by external expectation than internal truth. The first signal is chronic low-level dissatisfaction, not depression, not crisis, just a persistent, quiet sense that something is missing. That the life you are living, which by external measures may look entirely reasonable, does not quite fit. Like wearing shoes that are almost the right size, functional, but never quite comfortable. The second signal is the gap between what excites you privately and what you pursue publicly. The things that genuinely light you up, that you would do for free, that make time disappear, that connect you to something that feels real, are often the things you have been most systematically discouraged from taking seriously. Pay attention to that gap. It is one of the most reliable maps to your actual self. The third signal is the exhaustion of performance. Living someone else's life requires constant maintenance. You have to keep performing the version of yourself that fits the inherited script. And that performance, however automatic it has become, costs energy. The chronic tiredness that many people experience is not always physical. It is often the fatigue of sustaining an identity that does not quite belong to them. The fourth signal is the fear response to your own desires. When you imagine pursuing what actually calls to you, the thought is immediately followed by a cascade of reasons why it is not practical, not responsible, not realistic. That cascade is not wisdom. It is inherited fear. Someone else's voice, installed so early it sounds like your own. Let's go deeper. The ancient world had a name for the constructed self that accumulates through inheritance and social conditioning. Carl Jung, who spent his life translating the wisdom of ancient traditions into the language of modern psychology, called it the persona, the mask, the social face constructed to meet the expectations of the world. Not evil, not false in a simple sense, but fundamentally a performance rather than an expression. And Jung was clear about what happened when a person identified completely with their persona, when they forgot that the mask was a mask and began to believe it was their actual face. They lost access to what he called the self, the deeper, authentic center of the personality that existed beneath all the layers of conditioning and expectation, the part that knew, at a level below language, what it actually needed and what it was actually here to do. The Vedic tradition described the same dynamic through the concept of dharma, the individual's unique path, the specific role in the larger pattern of existence that only they could fill. The tragedy of a life lived outside one's dharma was not just personal, it was cosmic. Something that only you could contribute went uncontributed. The Stoic philosophers of ancient Greece built their entire ethical framework around a single question that most people never ask themselves seriously. What is actually mine? What desires, values, and ways of living arise from my own nature, and which have been imposed from outside? The examined life, as Socrates described it, was not a luxury or a philosophical exercise. It was the difference between living your own life and living someone else's. Let's go deeper. So how do you find your way back to yourself? Because this is the question that matters, and the answer is more specific than most people expect. The first step is the practice of honest subtraction. Not adding more to your life, more goals, more strategies, more self-improvement, but removing. Systematically questioning every significant commitment, belief, and direction in your life with one simple question. If no one whose opinion I value would ever know about this choice, would I still make it? The answers to that question are some of the most clarifying information available to a human being, because the things you would still choose in the absence of external judgment are the things that are actually yours. The second step is recovering your genuine emotional responses, not the managed, appropriate responses you have learned to produce in social contexts. The raw, immediate, pre-edited responses that arise before the conditioning kicks in. What genuinely excites you? What genuinely repels you? What makes you feel alive, and what makes you feel like you are slowly disappearing? These responses are not childish or irresponsible. They are data. The most accurate data you have about who you actually are beneath the inherited script. The third step is what the Jungian tradition calls individuation, the slow, often uncomfortable process of differentiating yourself from the collective, from the family pattern, from the social expectation, from the inherited definition of a successful or worthy life. This process is not dramatic. It does not require burning everything down. It requires the quiet, persistent practice of choosing, in small decisions and large ones, from your own center rather than from the inherited script. And it requires tolerating the discomfort that comes when the people around you notice that you are no longer playing the role they assigned you. Because the moment you begin living your own life, the people who were invested in the old version of you will feel it. That discomfort is not a sign you are doing something wrong. It is a sign you are finally doing something real. At some point, someone handed you a script. They did not ask if it fit. They did not check whether it matched who you actually were. They handed it to you before you could read and told you it was yours. And you believed them because you were a child, because they were the whole world, because there was no other script available and no way yet to know the difference. But you are not a child anymore. And somewhere beneath every layer of inherited fear, borrowed ambition, and someone else's definition of a life well lived, there is something that has been waiting with extraordinary patience for you to come back to it. Not a perfect version of yourself, not a fantasy, something simpler and more essential than that. The specific, unrepeatable way of being in the world that is yours and yours alone. You did not lose it. You were just handed so many other things to carry that you forgot it was there. Put some of them down. It is still there. If this landed somewhere real, leave a comment below. Tell us one thing in your life you suspect belongs to someone else. We read everyone. We will see you in the next one.